The silence in rural Arizona at night isn't normal. It's unsettling. Not the kind of quiet you get in the suburbs, where there's still traffic somewhere or a neighbor's light buzzing softly. Out here, when the sun drops behind the mesas, it feels like the entire world shuts down. The air cools fast, coyotes start calling, and the desert turns into something ancient and watching. That's what makes this story stick with me. Because what those two teenagers saw wasn't just an animal. It wasn't even something you could explain away as a trick of the dark. It was something that shouldn't exist, and it was digging. People in our town call it the cow graveyard. That's not an official name, obviously. It's just what locals started saying years ago because of what turns up there. The wash sits about a mile outside the last row of houses, cutting through the scrubland like a scar. In the rainy season, it fills with rushing water, but most of the year it's bone dry, just sand and rocks and twisted weeds. Cattle ranches stretch for miles out here, and every so often, an old cow wanders off and dies somewhere it can't be found until the heat does what it always does. Sometimes scavengers drag pieces into the wash. Sometimes flash floods uncover things that were buried. If you walk down there long enough, you'll find ribs half sunk in sand, skulls bleached white, jawbones with teeth still clinging like stubborn memories. It's morbid, but it's also weirdly normal if you grow up here. So when Mason texted me on January 30th, asking if I wanted to come with him and his cousin Eli to check it out at night, I didn't think much of it. Teenagers get bored. The desert is big, and boredom makes you do stupid things. We didn't go far into the wash at first, just enough to feel like we were doing something dangerous. The moon was thin, barely there, and the only light came from Eli's phone flashlight cutting across sand. We joked about coyotes, about skinwalkers, because people always joke about skinwalkers out here. Mason kicked at a half-buried vertebra and laughed. "Dude, imagine if something was living down here," he said. Eli snorted. "Yeah, like a cow ghost." That's when we heard it. At first it sounded like an animal scraping at the ground, a frantic, ugly sound, claw against dirt, sand being thrown aside in quick bursts. We froze instantly. The desert has a way of making sounds travel. You can hear things you shouldn't be able to hear. A rabbit moving, a lizard skittering. This was heavier, closer. Mason whispered, "You guys hear that?" Eli angled his phone light down the wash. The beam stretched maybe 30 feet before it caught something moving. At first, my brain couldn't process it. It was too wrong in shape. Something crouched low in the sand, shoulders rising and falling like a machine. Its back was massive, hunched, almost like a bear, but it was too big, twice the size of any bear that could exist out here. Its arms were wrong. They weren't paws, they were hands. Long, pale hands that looked almost human, except stretched. The fingers too long, bending strangely as they scooped sand away. It was digging, not casually, not like an animal making a den. It was digging like it had to get something out, or hide something fast. The sound was unbearable up close. Wet sand scraping, breath coming out in harsh, uneven huffs. Eli's flashlight trembled. The creature didn't notice us at first. Its head was down, buried in its work. Then Mason shifted his foot. A tiny crunch of gravel. That was all it took. The digging stopped instantly. Complete silence. For half a second, it stayed frozen, hands still sunk in sand. Then its head turned. Slow, too slow, and the beam of the flashlight caught its face. I don't even know how to describe it properly. It wasn't a snout like a bear. It wasn't a human face either. It was stretched. The skin looked tight over bone, like something wearing the shape of a face instead of owning it. And its eyes reflected back in the light with a sickly yellow glow. Not like an animal's normal reflection. This was wrong. Diseased. Like headlights through fog. It stared at us. And I swear, in that moment, it understood exactly what we were. Not prey, witnesses. Eli made a sound, a strangled gasp, and the creature's hands flexed in the sand. It started to rise. I didn't wait to see how tall it was standing. Mason shouted, "Run." We bolted. Sand sprayed under our shoes as we scrambled up the wash. I could hear Eli behind me, breathing like he was about to pass out. And behind us, that digging sound again, but faster, almost furious. Like it was finishing something before coming after us. We didn't look back. We ran all the way to Mason's house, slammed the door, locked it, and stood there shaking in the kitchen light like idiots who just realized the world was bigger than we thought. Mason's mom was asleep. The house was quiet. Eli kept whispering, "What was that? What was that?" Mason's face was pale. "I don't know," he said, but his voice didn't sound convincing. We stayed up until dawn, staring out the windows like something would step into the yard. Nothing did. No yellow eyes, no scraping hands, just sunrise bleeding across the desert like nothing happened. That's the worst part about the morning. It makes you feel crazy, like the night was a dream. Around 8 a.m., Mason said, "We have to go back." Eli immediately said no. I should have said no too, but curiosity is its own kind of sickness. So we went. The wash looked normal in daylight, ugly and empty. Sand rippled by wind. We walked slowly, hearts hammering, scanning every shadow. When we reached the spot where we'd seen it, I stopped cold. The hole was gone, not filled in poorly, not covered with loose sand, perfectly filled, smoothed out like it had never been there. Mason crouched down, running his fingers over the surface. No disturbed sand, no scattered dirt piles, nothing. Eli whispered, "That's impossible." And then Mason said the thing that made my stomach drop. "There should be tracks." He was right. Something that big, something twice the size of a bear, would leave footprints, claw marks, drag marks. But the sand was untouched, like the creature had never been there, like it had floated, or like the desert itself had erased it. Eli backed away. "Let's go, please." But Mason kept staring at the ground. Then he pointed. Half buried near the spot was something small and white, a bone. Not cow bone. Too delicate. Mason picked it up carefully. It was a finger bone. Human. We all froze. The wash suddenly felt like it was holding its breath. Mason dropped it like it burned. Eli started shaking. No, we left immediately. We didn't tell the police. What would we even say? Hey, we saw a monster with human hands digging in the cow graveyard? We tried to convince ourselves it was a bear with mange, a prank, a hallucination. But none of those explanations fit. A bear doesn't have hands. A prank doesn't erase its own tracks, and hallucinations don't leave bones behind. That night I didn't sleep. I kept seeing those eyes, that sickly yellow reflection, and the way it looked at us, not startled, not afraid, almost annoyed, like we interrupted something private. Around 2 a.m. my phone buzzed. Text from Mason, just 3 words, "It's outside." I stared at it, pulse roaring in my ears. I typed back, "What?" No response. Then another message, "I hear digging." My mouth went dry. I called him immediately. No answer. I called again. Straight to voicemail. I sat there in my dark room, listening to the silence of my own house. And then, faintly, from somewhere outside, carried through the desert air, scraping, sand being thrown, that frantic digging sound. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Because suddenly I understood something I hadn't before. The creature wasn't just digging randomly. It wasn't hunting cattle bones. It was burying something, hiding something, and maybe it didn't like being seen. The next morning, Mason didn't answer his door. His mom thought he was still asleep, but his bed was empty. His window was open. And out behind the house, in the soft sand, there were no footprints, no tracks. Just one perfectly smoothed over patch of ground, like the desert had been carefully tucked back into place. And somewhere out in the wash, the cow graveyard waited, silent, hungry. If you ever find yourself near a dry creek bed like that, don't look too closely. And whatever you do, don't interrupt something that's digging. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe and stay far away from the wash. Living in Washington, D.C. teaches you something fast. No matter how new the buildings look, no matter how modern the streets feel, you're never far from something old, something still lingering. This city isn't just history. It's layers of power, secrets, and stories stacked on top of each other. Government offices built on forgotten streets. Luxury apartments sitting above ground that used to be cemeteries, hospitals, battlefields. History doesn't disappear here. It just gets covered up. This happened on January 31st, 2026, and it started with a smell. The witness was a tenant on the 3rd floor of a modern apartment complex. One of those places with glass doors, clean hallways, security cameras on every corner, the kind of building that feels sterile, almost too polished. Nothing about it looked haunted, which is what made this worse. The tenant, I'll call her Marissa, had lived there for almost a year. She wasn't superstitious. She didn't believe in ghosts. Her biggest complaint about the building was how thin the walls were and how overpriced everything in DC always is. But about 2 months before this report, she noticed something strange, a smell. At first it was faint. It would drift into her apartment late at night, usually when she was sitting on the couch watching TV or brushing her teeth before bed. It smelled like damp soil, wet leaves, that earthy graveyard scent you get after rain, when the ground feels alive in the wrong way. Marissa thought it was coming from outside, maybe the courtyard landscaping, maybe the ventilation system pulling in air from somewhere weird. But the thing was, it didn't smell like fresh rain. It smelled like something dug up, like dirt that hadn't seen sunlight in years. The smell would come and go, never lasting long enough to investigate properly. And eventually, like most unsettling things, she started ignoring it. Until January 30th. That night, Marissa came home around 11 p.m. It had been cold, the kind of sharp winter cold that makes the city feel brittle. She unlocked her door, stepped inside, and stopped immediately. The smell hit her like a wall, not faint, not subtle, overpowering. Her apartment reeked of wet earth, rotting leaves, and something darker underneath, like the air inside a cemetery right after someone's been buried. Marissa gagged, covering her nose. What the hell? She checked the kitchen first. Trash was taken out. No spoiled food. No plumbing issues. She went to the bathroom. Nothing. No leaks. No mold. But the smell was everywhere. Thick. Heavy. Almost humid. Like the air itself was damp. She opened windows despite the cold. The smell didn't leave. If anything, it felt like it was coming from the hallway outside her front door. Marissa hesitated. Then she stepped closer. Her door was solid wood, painted white, with one of those brass peepholes in the center. The smell was strongest there, right at the base of the door, like something on the other side was pressing damp soil up against it. Marissa told herself she was being ridiculous. Maybe someone spilled something in the hall. Maybe a neighbor had plants. Still, her stomach felt tight. She leaned down, pressing her ear close. Silence. No footsteps. No voices. Just the faint hum of the building's ventilation. She stood up, heart uneasy, and looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. Bright fluorescent lights. Clean carpet. No shadows. No one standing there. Marissa exhaled shakily. Okay, fine. She locked the deadbolt, double-checked it, and went back inside. But she couldn't relax. The smell clung to everything. It felt wrong. Not just unpleasant. Wrong. Around 1:30 a.m., she finally got into bed. The windows were still cracked open, cold air creeping in. She lay staring at the ceiling, trying to breathe through her mouth. Then she heard it, a soft sound. At first, she thought it was part of a dream, a faint scrape. Then again, scratch. Marissa's eyes snapped open. The sound was coming from the front door. Slow, deliberate, like fingernails dragging up wood. Her body went cold instantly. She sat up listening. Scratch. A pause. Then again. Scratch. Not knocking, not pounding. Just that slow, unbearable dragging sound. Like something outside was tracing the door, feeling it, testing it. Marissa whispered, no. Her heart hammered so loud she thought it would drown out everything else. But the scraping continued. Long nails moving upward. Stopping, starting again. It was intimate in the worst way. Like whoever or whatever was doing it knew she was inside. Marissa reached for her phone, hands shaking violently. She almost called the police. But what would she say? Someone is scratching my door? They'd ask if she saw anyone. So she forced herself out of bed. Her legs felt weak. She crept down the hallway, toward the front door, every nerve screaming at her to stop. The smell was stronger now, so strong her eyes watered. Wet soil, grave dirt, decay. She stood a few feet away from the door, frozen. The scraping stopped. Silence. For a moment she thought maybe she imagined it. Then, scratch, but lower, at the bottom of the door, as if whatever was outside had crouched down. Marissa's breath hitched. She leaned forward and looked through the peephole again. Nothing. Empty hallway. No one. No shadow. No movement. But the smell. It was suffocating. And then the scratching changed. Not upward anymore. Now it was. Slower. Horizontal. Like nails searching along the crack beneath the door. Marissa felt tears prick her eyes. And then she heard something else. A sound so faint she almost missed it. Breathing. Not hers. On the other side. Wet. Patient breathing. Right against the wood, Marissa stumbled backward, covering her mouth. Her mind raced. Hallucination, sleep paralysis, a prank. But none of those explained the smell. None of those explained the breathing. She backed into the kitchen, grabbed the largest knife she owned, and stood there shaking in the dark. The scraping continued for what felt like hours, sometimes stopping, sometimes starting again, always slow, always deliberate. Like whatever was outside wasn't trying to break in, it was waiting for her to open the door. At some point near 4 a.m., the smell began to fade. The scraping stopped. Silence returned. Marissa didn't move until sunlight crept through the windows. When morning finally came, she felt numb, exhausted, like she'd survived something she couldn't explain. She approached the front door cautiously. The smell was almost gone now, only a faint trace lingering. She unlocked the deadbolt with trembling fingers, paused, then opened the door quickly. The hallway was empty. Of course it was. Bright, normal, clean, no dirt, no leaves, no sign of anything. Marissa exhaled shakily, almost laughing. Then she looked down. At the very bottom of the door, near the crack, there were scratches, faint, vertical lines carved into the paint. 4 of them, close together, like fingernails, like something had been trying to reach under. Marissa's stomach dropped so hard she felt sick. She crouched, running her fingers over them. They were real, not old, not from moving furniture, fresh. She stood up slowly, staring into the empty hallway, and then she noticed something else. A smear on the carpet just outside her door. Dark, damp, like wet soil. Marissa shut the door immediately and locked it again. She didn't go to work that day. Instead, she searched the building online. Old records, property history, anything. What she found made her blood run cold. Before the modern complex was built, the lot had been something else. A small graveyard, a forgotten burial ground from the 1800s, moved officially decades ago to make room for development. But the records were incomplete. Some graves relocated, some unaccounted for. Marissa stared at the screen, throat tight. That night, she stayed with a friend. She didn't go back for 3 days. When she finally returned, the smell was gone. The scratches had been painted over by maintenance. No one believed her. But sometimes, late at night, when she walks down the hallway, she swears she can still catch it, that damp graveyard scent. And she wonders if something beneath the building is still trying to get out. Or worse, if something already did. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe and always trust strange smells at night. Malibu at night has a way of feeling almost unreal. Most people only picture beaches, celebrity mansions, warm ocean air, and expensive lights shining behind glass walls. But once the tourists disappear, once the coastline finally goes quiet, Malibu turns into something completely different. The Pacific becomes a dark void, and the whole place feels unfamiliar. The wind off the water sounds like whisper, and those mansions up in the hills, they don't feel like houses. They feel like places built too close to the edge. This happened on February 1st, 2026. And it didn't happen in some abandoned asylum or deep forest. It happened in one of the most high-end recovery centers in California, a place people pay thousands of dollars a week to get better. A place that used to be a historic mansion, a place where the past never really left. The witness was a resident there. I'll call him Jordan. Jordan wasn't the kind of guy who believed in ghosts. He'd been through too much real-life horror to waste energy on supernatural stuff. Addiction had already shown him the darkest parts of being human. So when he checked into this recovery center, perched above the cliffs with ocean views and manicured courtyards, he thought maybe, for once, he'd be somewhere safe. Somewhere clean, somewhere calm. The mansion itself was massive, built decades ago by someone with old money and old secrets. High archways, marble floors, dark wood staircases that creaked even under the softest step. Staff called it historic. Residents called it creepy. At night, the building felt too big, too quiet. Jordan's room was on the 2nd floor, facing inward toward the gated courtyard. The courtyard was beautiful in a way that almost looked staged. Stone pathways, trimmed hedges, a fountain that ran during the day but shut off at night, leaving the air strangely still. Bushes lined the walls like dark silhouettes, and beyond them, the mansion rose up, its roof slanting sharply toward the sky. Jordan had been there about 2 weeks when he started waking up in the middle of the night. Not from nightmares, not from withdrawal, just waking up. The kind of waking where you feel like something pulled you out of sleep, like your body knew something before your mind did. At first, he thought it was just anxiety. The program was intense. Therapy sessions, group meetings, long days unpacking trauma. Sleep didn't come easy. But then the pattern started. Every night around the same time, 2:40, 2:45, he'd wake up and he'd feel this strange pressure in the air, like the courtyard outside was waiting. One night he finally sat up and looked out the window. Moonlight spilled over the hedges, turning everything pale silver. The bushes were motionless. The fountain was dark. Nothing was there. Jordan exhaled, almost laughing at himself. Then he noticed something. One of the bushes near the far end of the courtyard rustled, just slightly. Jordan leaned forward. He expected a raccoon, maybe a cat. Then something emerged. At first, his brain refused to label it. It was tall, too tall, and it wasn't walking. It was floating, a figure, very skinny, almost stretched thin like it didn't belong in this world. And it was white, not the color of clothing, not the color of skin, the color of something glowing faintly, like fog lit from within. It drifted out of the bush as if the leaves weren't even touching it. Jordan's breath caught. The figure moved slowly across the courtyard, soundless. Its limbs hung wrong, too long, too narrow. Its head was slightly tilted, like it was listening. Jordan couldn't see a face, just blank whiteness. The figure reached the center of the courtyard. Then, without stopping, it slipped into another bush on the opposite side and vanished. Jordan sat frozen. His heart hammered so hard he thought it might wake the entire floor. He stared at the bush where it disappeared. Nothing moved. No sound, no rustling leaves, just stillness. He didn't sleep after that. The next morning, Jordan told himself it was exhaustion, a trick of moonlight, a hallucination brought on by stress. He didn't mention it in group therapy because he didn't want people to look at him like he was unstable. Recovery centers are already full of people questioning their own minds, so he kept it to himself for 2 days. Then, on the third night, it happened again. Same time, same waking feeling. Jordan sat up instantly, dread crawling over his skin. He looked out the window. The courtyard was empty. Then the bush rustled, and there it was. The tall, glowing, skeletal figure emerging like it had always been there, floating, crossing, silent, always moving in the same direction, bush to bush. Jordan watched, paralyzed, and again, it vanished into the hedge. When it was gone, Jordan didn't hesitate. He got out of bed, threw on a hoodie, and stepped into the hallway. The recovery center was dim at night, lit by soft amber lamps. He walked down to the nurse's station where a staff member sat flipping through paperwork. The staff member was older, calm-looking, the type who'd seen everything. Jordan cleared his throat. "Can I ask you something?" The staff member glanced up. "You okay?" Jordan swallowed. I saw something outside." The staff member's expression didn't change. Jordan rushed ahead before he could stop himself. In the courtyard, a figure, tall, white, floating, silence. The staff member blinked slowly. Then Jordan noticed it, the color draining from his face, the man's hands tightening around his pen. Jordan's stomach dropped. "You've seen it," Jordan whispered. The staff member didn't answer right away. He looked down the hallway, as if checking who might be listening. Then he leaned forward, voice low. "You're not supposed to go out there at night." Jordan's throat went dry. "So it's real?" The staff member exhaled shakily. "Multiple people have seen it," he admitted. For years, Jordan felt cold all over. "What is it?" The staff member's eyes flickered toward the courtyard doors. "It always moves the same way," he said quietly, bush to bush. Jordan frowned. "Toward the roof?" The staff member nodded once. "Before this was a recovery center, it was owned by a man named Harlan Voss." Jordan didn't recognize the name. The staff member continued anyway, like he'd been holding it in too long. "He threw parties here, big ones. Celebrities, politicians, people with too much money and too many secrets." Jordan listened, barely breathing. One night, he fell from the roof. Jordan's stomach twisted. "Fell?" The staff member hesitated. "They said it was an accident. Too much alcohol." Lost his footing. He paused. "But people who worked here back then, they said he was running." Jordan's skin prickled. "Running from what?" The staff member's voice dropped even lower. "No one knows. But the last person who saw him alive said he looked terrified, like he was being chased by something he couldn't explain." Jordan stared. "And now, that thing." The staff member shook his head. "Not a thing. Him?" Jordan's mouth went dry. "You think it's his ghost?" The staff member didn't answer directly. He just said, "Every time someone sees the figure, it moves toward the roof. Always the same direction, like it's replaying something." Jordan's pulse roared in his ears. "That's why it's floating." The staff member looked sick. "We've had residents check out early because of it. Staff quit, but the owners don't talk about it. Bad for business." Jordan forced a laugh that came out wrong. "So you just let people see it?" The staff member's face tightened. "We tell them it's stress, exhaustion, hallucinations." Jordan whispered, but you know it's real. The staff member finally met his eyes. I know what I've seen. That night, Jordan didn't want to sleep. He stayed up with the lamp on, staring at the window. 2:45 came. Nothing happened. Jordan almost convinced himself it was over. Then, at 3:12, the courtyard lights flickered. Jordan's breath caught. The bushes moved, and the figure emerged. But this time, it didn't float across smoothly. It stopped in the center of the courtyard. Jordan's stomach dropped. It wasn't supposed to stop. It had never stopped. The figure's head tilted upward, toward Jordan's window. Jordan froze. For the first time, he felt certain. It knew he was watching. The whiteness brightened slightly, like fog catching headlights. Jordan couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then the figure drifted forward again. But instead of vanishing into the bush, it moved toward the mansion itself, toward the wall, toward the roof line. Jordan watched, trembling as it rose. Not climbing, not walking, rising straight up the side of the building like gravity didn't apply. His heart slammed in his chest. The figure reached the edge of the roof and paused. For a long moment, it stood there against the dark sky, a thin white slash of impossible light. Then, it stepped forward, off the roof. Jordan's mouth opened in a silent scream. The figure fell, but it didn't drop like a body. It drifted downward slowly, weightless, like a leaf. Halfway down, it vanished. Just gone. Jordan sat shaking until morning. He checked out that afternoon. The staff didn't argue. They'd seen it before. As Jordan left, he glanced back at the mansion. Sunlight made it look harmless, beautiful even. But he knew better now. Some places don't heal you. Some places keep the worst moments of their history trapped inside their walls, replaying, waiting. And if you watch too long, they might notice you. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe and never look up at night.